Okay, so I've struck on a method by which it may be possible to show where Noam Chomsky stands with respect to this break that Strauss is showing us. Strauss speaks of, he doesn't use the word sobriety, but it seems to be what he means, the sobriety of Spinoza, or we could say the genuine freedom of thought of Spinoza in contradistinction to these thinkings on the side of the Enlightenment, which attempts to mock out of existence orthodoxy or religion as it was historically, and on the other side, Romanticism. So the problem I had come across was that it's easy to identify um, the brights and the more strident forms of so-called, they call it modern atheism, but it's really contemporary atheism, um, which could or may not include Sam Harris, but obviously Steven Pinker, and Daniel Dennett. But what about Chomsky? What about people who present themselves constantly as avatars, or as let's say as the sort of the pure knights of rationality? And when they speak of rationality, they often appeal to supposedly um, perennial instances of common sense, such as that any child knows. Chomsky will always give the example, like any child knows what it means to want to be free rather than to um, work for a corporation where somebody's telling you how to dress, when you can take a bathroom break, who you can speak to, etc., etc., etc. He appeals to simple reasoning, which doesn't fall afoul of, doesn't obviously fall below the level of what thinking people can accept, for the reason that even if I'm aware of historical changes in common sense, and in subnote, in addition, that common sense itself is a concept which had to come into existence, and in fact, the notion of endoxa in Aristotle seems to be the first proper enunciation of it. But even putting those issues of historicism in that sense aside, it does seem like at any time in any place, human beings generally would not want to be in the situation of being having this net of constant um, surveillance and control cast over them. That seems obvious. So Chomsky's arguments sometimes in these limited cases seem to make some sense on the face of them at first blush, I'd say. So what's the problem with Chomsky here? So I wanted to link this to what Strauss is saying about um, evil. So Strauss is saying, could it be that the Orthodox account, um, which is to say that Orthodox, again, Orthodox only seems to become Orthodox in the light of the modern um, sort of swerve and swerving asunder of the waters of the tradition, as it were, which ceased to be only the tradition. So what does that mean? And then, oh yeah, so what Strauss is saying is, could the Orthodox understanding of human nature be in some way, I don't know if he says more profound, but better than the current understanding? Could the understanding in the tradition of the profundity of human capacity, human power for evil, which means power can mean sort of potential that we have it in us to do all kinds of evil things, could, of course, he's writing, Strauss is writing here in the light of not so long after World War II, or a couple, 15 years. Could the orthodoxy have a better understanding of the potential of human evil, therefore be superior to the reasoned accounts? So I'm thinking of so what I wanted to use is, and then let's link this on the other side to what Dostoevsky's saying is the half-truth of science. So where does Chomsky stand in this half-truth of science issue? And why is the half-truth of science so fatal? So Musil, Robert Musil, I think he was born in 1880, writes about his famous book, Der Mann ohne Eigenschatten, is it called? I forget what the man without characteristics. Could this title also be rendered, just for intelligibility in this context? Could we switch out man without characteristics for man without genuineness? This Heideggerian Eigenlichkeit, so der Mann ohne Eigenlichkeit. Because what is he talking about here? So this is the point. Chomsky, let's do it by looking at Chomsky's account of the Grand Inquisitor. So Chomsky thinks that the Grand Inquisitor means that on the one side, you have somebody like Hobbes, and on the other side you have somebody like himself or Rousseau. He speaks about this very recently. He gave a talk which seems to sum up his whole thinking of his long life to, I think it's the Japanese Society of Language or something along those lines. It's on YouTube. But he quickly mentions this is his quick comment on the Grand Inquisitor. He seems to sum it up that way, and then to take the side of the people that think human beings can handle freedom. They don't need to be controlled. So I guess his image is like what I was just saying, the corporate master and the control when you go to the bathroom, what kind of clothes you can wear, who you can speak to and how long during the day, whether or not you're supposed to smile at people you encounter, etc., and whether people have to be free or unfree in this kind of sense, and whether people can handle anarchy in the sense of removal of the central government. But on my view, this isn't at all what Dostoevsky was trying to express. What Dostoevsky was trying to express was the rise of the man without quality, or the man without genuineness. In Musil's example, or let's say first Dostoevsky gives, one of Dostoevsky's prime examples is the Crystal Palace exhibit in London in 1851, which I think stood well beyond Dostoevsky's lifetime, actually, as this image of a pure glass sky of rationality. Dostoevsky also gives examples such as train tables and the idea that the whole of life could be worked out like these German train tables, or something along the line where whatever situation you're in, you simply consult um, the train table, and then it tells you when the train's coming. But instead of when the train's coming, it tells you take this vitamin, or it tells you this is the action you should do if you want this result, and so forth. Everything will be worked out, and so something like the last man, Nietzsche's last man, will arise, and all freedom will be removed, and so therefore the Grand Inquisitor is more like a paternalist. He's more like a what you call a technocrat. So, still in a lot of English-speaking countries in India, the word technocrat is largely used in a positive way. It's sometimes used in a positive way here. Elon Musk or some of these type of people could be viewed as technocrats. The PayPal, the guy that did PayPal. Musil gives the example, remembering that Musil is writing sort of closer to the World War II time, like in the 30s. He gives the example in the beginning of his novel of braking distance, and there's this woman is freaked out by an accident, and her companion says, well, they just have to get the braking distances down on those lorries or those trucks. And then Musil says, even though she didn't understand what braking distance meant or have the slightest interest in finding out what it meant, the technical details of this problem, she was appeased or placated. She was calmed simply by the observation that this was now a technical problem, and some people were at work at solving it. It no longer within the sphere of free and accidental happenings, which one simply had to be anxious about. In this sense, what Heidegger means by technological essence in Das Mann corresponds to this, the man without the characteristics or qualities, in the following way. You could say Das Mann is hoi polloi for the Greeks. So hoi polloi means the opinions which are in power, which are unexamined opinions. And these opinions constitute the thinking of the many. So the many is not, as Strauss points out, the many is not exactly the same thing as the majority. The many is this background force that's operative in some way in all of us. Because even if we change our opinion, like if we find out that the common example of Galileo going against the church is much more complex, and Galileo was really much more of a devious and in many ways incompetent and nasty person than he's given to be as the hero of enlightenment. And he said all kinds of things which were simply demonstratively false, while we're putting forward all kind of rhetoric about how empirical he was and how his enemies in the university were not empirical, and all kinds of things which were just polemical and couldn't be taken seriously. So nonetheless, you know that there's still a large portion of the population which will accept without further ado the Galileo and church example. Things like that. So this is part of what's meant by Das Man or hoi polloi, and it's different from what's meant by a majority opinion, because the majority opinion, for instance, seems to imply a knowledgeable opinion, informed opinion, uh, and has other implications. So I think that what Dostoevsky is saying is, if the Das Man opinion, the less man opinion, this this opinion of the man without qualities, um, becomes this technological opinions. This can be solved this way. The paternalist opinions, we need, the Kastanstein is the. I know Kastanstein is demonized by some Fox News people, but I had this criticism um, independently before I knew that, and I think there's some accuracy to it. He doesn't need to be demonized, but he's just a strong example of technocratic paternalism, and it's just like the example of the breaking distance thing. So obviously it's not clearly a bad thing, but that's what's happening. So increasingly, I think the Grand Inquisitor stands more for somebody along the line of Kassestein, although that would make him, that's much more grandiose than he deserves, I suppose. But in a way, it makes sense because he has a lot of power. This is one man who's bringing out policies and agendas which affect the whole world. But it's not due to simply his unique thinking, but it's because of the rise of technological essence, and correspondingly a hoi polloi or Das Man that thinks that way. And so the Grand Inquisitor stands on that side. In this way, I think Chomsky must stand on the side of the Grand Inquisitor properly, because he's for technological solutions up to a point. He's less for the danger of the real freedom of the experiment, which is not yet completed. Clearly, he's not for the romanticism, but he's also not for what seems Strauss and Spinoza seem to be pointing at. And I want to go more into this. I think the Jewish tradition has a stronger understanding of what genuine free thought means, rather than free thinking in this polemical sense of the Enlightenment against religion or something like that, but genuine, open, free thinking in the strongest sense of reason. Okay, so I feel like that's somewhat inadequate, what I said, but I wanted to get that theme out there for a little bit of orientation for the coming investigations.